What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the EPM Show. This is all things enterprise performance management, and we are here to give you an unfair career advantage. Today, we hosted Rohan Batra on the show. He is the global head of partnerships at Pigment, and he previously built a successful partnership program at Zuora as well. He joins me today, and we talk everything partnerships and what it looks like to create a successful partner ecosystem. In this episode, you'll learn a lot about just how the partnership model works and ultimately benefits the customer, what types of characteristics to look for in a thriving partnership ecosystem, and some of the core tenets around Pigments, what they call Partner Universe. I love that term. They're thinking big at Pigment. And then some of the other stuff we talked about today is how to identify the right partners for your ecosystem and your product, and why sometimes bigger is not always better. We also talked about how partnerships can ultimately enhance the sales cycle, and we dispelled a few myths that some folks might have. And then, if you are in the audience and you are interested in building a career in partnerships, Rohan had some really awesome tactical steps that you can take to grow your career in that direction. Check it out. Rohan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Chad. How are you?
Good. I'm going to get us started here with our standard intro. So just so the audience can get to know you a little bit, give me your career flyover in 60 seconds or less whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Let's go. So I started my career at Accenture, a very large consulting organization. Spent almost 7 years there, actually working very closely with senior leadership on PMO and financial management of large SAP programs. Back in 2015, I then kind of had an itch for a startup type company, joined a company called Zuora, which was about 100 mil run rate at the time and is a leader in the subscription billing and revenue automation space. I stayed with that company for almost 8 years through IPO in 2018 and thereafter for about 4 years. And then really towards the end of last year, I got the itch to want to build my own partner function company and bring a vision to that. And at the right time in the right place, Pigment came along and all the stars lined up for both of us. And I've been at Pigment since late January, leading the global partner function here.
There we go. You crushed it. And so today's episode is going to be all about partnerships. And I'm excited for this because we haven't done a partnership episode before. And it's a key part of just the EPM ecosystem, the EPM industry. So many platforms go to market through partnerships. And so I'm glad we're going to dive into that. But before we do, I actually found out from you, I had a fun question prepared. And then I found out that you have 2 kids, 6 and 3. And so I was like, oh, that changes my question. So my fun question for you today is, what is the craziest thing that your kids have done?
Ooh. Okay, there's one that comes to mind. My wife blames me for it, and she's probably right. There was one day we're home, and my son was probably 3 years old at the time, three and a half. He couldn't have been more than that. And he just whips out like the worst curse word you could imagine. He goes, effing dude. And my wife and I look at each other, we're like, did he say that? And he definitely said that because he repeated it. And then we went through the process of trying to figure out how he learned these words and how he said it. And she attributes it to, I must have said it at some point while driving in New York, and he picked up on it. So I don't have a good defense to mount against that. So I think
Yeah,
that's one that just immediately comes to mind.
that is great. Like I told you offline, we're expecting our first. And so I'm looking forward to those moments where you're just like, where did you hear that?
Yeah, it happens, and it's funny. You kind of got to play a serious face and then laugh behind the scenes. And I'll say what's great about children is just the innocence, right? The
Yeah.
innocence, seeing all the stages they go through. It's
Yeah.
quite a journey.
A very good friend and mentor of mine. He's a mentor. When I was in college, some of my teammates and I would go over to his house, we'd eat dinner, and he had a 5-year-old son at the time. And we're sitting there at the table and he's sitting with us and we're talking about movies. And one of my buddies, he's like, oh, like this movie, he's like, this movie's trash. That movie's trash. And he just kind of kept saying, oh, this movie's trash, whatever. And next thing you know, the kid just starts going, trash, trash. And then we were like, Silas, how was your dinner? And he goes, trash. And we're like, oh no.
Yeah,
This
this one
mom's
actually happened last night with my daughter too. My wife and I were sitting at the table with her, and I think one of us threw out the word player, and then my daughter goes, "I'm a player," and I just, oh my gosh, what have we done?
We're failing.
I mean,
No. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, hey, I love that, and we could share in that right now. But let's jump in. Let's talk about partner ecosystems. So, Rohan, I'm just going to tee it up to you. Talk to me about how partner ecosystems ultimately benefit the customer.
Yeah, and I'll maybe give you two examples here because there's different value that can be delivered to customers in different ways. The first example I can give you is a technology partnership. So that's partnership between two software companies typically. And ultimately, I think the value delivered to a customer in those scenarios is your product and some adjacent product or product alongside it drives more value to the end customer. And what that could look like is, I've got a core planning tool on this side. I've got some other core financial system or product that the office of the CFO is also using on that side. And they can coexist as separate entities. But ideally, if I can bring them together and integrate key pieces to help support an overall business process, there's immediate added value there to the customer. To maybe articulate a different example with consulting or systems integrator partnerships, oftentimes what you'll find is product companies or software companies, they obviously have their own internal professional services organization that's responsible for helping customers get up and live and using the product. Great, well and good. There's a lot of expertise there. But what goes into making a project successful, especially as you get into more complex ones, can be a lot more than just someone who knows how to gather the requirements, plug in the software, and get it working. For example, there could be significant data transformation work that needs to go on before you're even ready to implement the software. Or you may come into a customer who's not actually clear on their requirements and needs help to actually define very clear and organizationally unified requirements before they can tell a vendor how they want to implement software. And I think that's another example of the power of partnerships is software company knows their product really well. Systems integrator has experience across maybe 100 companies in that same industry who've done it a bunch of different ways, integrating the same products. And the combination of those ultimately helps the customer deliver the ROI they want in an investment or any other software.
I'm glad that you talked about ROI there at the end, because a colleague of yours who we've had on the show, Julie and Lucia Share,
Yeah.
drove home this idea that you might have the best planning tool on the market. It could be the best looking, you have the best UX, it could handle sparsity better than anybody else. But if no one is using it, it's not valuable at all. So I have to imagine that the end goal of partner ecosystem, which you talked about, the system integrator who's seen it done 100 different ways in that industry, and the platform ultimately are driving towards that ROI, which the ROI starts with usage and adoption, right? The product's got to be adopted. It's got to be leveraged. If customers are going to be in it for 6, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, they've got to enjoy it and get value out of it. So I imagine that that's ultimately an effective partner ecosystem is driving towards.
100%. And look, different customers are on different journeys, right? Some have much more mature processes internally, some do not at the time they buy software. And so having an SI alongside the customer, alongside the software vendor, really helps have the greatest probability for success with your investment and investments across your ecosystem, because oftentimes these products need to speak to one another as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing there is it's the right combination is able to meet the customer wherever they are.
100%.
Right. So speaking of that, and just kind of these different aspects of a partner ecosystem, talk to me a little bit about some of the defining characteristics of a partner ecosystem.
Yeah. So I'll maybe keep it to like generic principles that are sometimes not as obvious as they seem, especially when you get down to individual interactions. So first, I would say it's important to be easy to do business with and be partner friendly. What you have to understand is fundamentally the software business model and how you make money with a software company is different than how a consulting organization makes money, right? They make it on services, labor, and rates, and the amount of time they spend with a customer and supporting them with their differentiated knowledge. Obviously, a software company ultimately makes margins on the software sales, not on professional services revenue. And so I think first is you have to understand there's a fundamental difference in the business models. And so you said meet the customer where they are. There's also an element of you need to be able to meet the partner where they are and understand how they go to market and understand if I want a partner to bring me lead, they're not just going to bring the leads overnight. They first need to understand that my product can hold up in front of their customer base, that they're very confident implementing it and can do so successfully. And it's only after you go through that quote unquote rite of passage are they going to feel confident saying, I am willing to put my brand, my reputation up and put whatever software it is in front of a prospective customer as a potential viable solution for them to meet their business needs. Because ultimately their allegiance is to the customer, right? And to serve the customer right. So then that's the second thing. What else can I think about there? I'd say another key principle is they're often like shiny objects in the partnerships world. So one of them is the GSI, these massive organizations like Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, many others, right? And those are often attractive places for the C-suite to look at and say, hey, I want to be associated with that brand. Okay, that's well and good, but these are massive, highly matrixed organizations. And so you need to ensure you find the right intersection point with those organizations that ultimately lines up to how they go to market and how your company is going to market. And so to just give you a really simple example there, and then I'll pause for any follow-up questions. You may have a product that is focused exclusively on SMB companies, and you go take that product to pick a GSI and say, partner with me today. Well, that GSI may not have a go-to-market motion focused on serving the SMB customers. They may only serve Fortune 500 customers. And in that perspective, you are not a fit for them. It's nothing personal, but it doesn't align to how they go to business. And so I think that's really important. Maybe another way to say it is put yourselves in the shoes of the partner and really understand their business deeply so that you can find effective alignment or intersectionality in how you go to market together.
What I'm hearing you say there is one of the key characteristics of an effective partner ecosystem is where the partners are set up for success. Because in a partnership, you are depending on one another for success. You're both driving revenue, and that's a function of value provided to the customer at the end of the day. So what are some of can you give me a few other maybe specific examples about maybe even how Pigment's approaching partnerships to set your partners up for success in your ecosystem?
Yeah, sure thing. So without giving away any trade secrets, I will say a few of our core principles, right? So one, radical candor or radical transparency with our partners from the first call a prospective partner has with us to the entire journey along being a partner alongside us. There's clear transparency where we want them focused, what our definition of good is for a partnership in the year, just general expectations we have, right? Sometimes companies are not clear on what they expect from the partner and obviously what the partner expects from them in return, how we jointly engage in the sales cycle and roles and responsibilities there. So just radical transparency is a really, really important one. And it's something we really anchor on. Second is making sure that behaviors align with incentives. So I'm all for incentivizing partners. It's an important element of them obviously being engaged with us and growing a profitable business from a partnership with us. But I want to ensure that the behaviors we want to see from them align with the incentives we give them, right? And so to give you a very simple example of this, there are many different ways to do referral fees in the industry. Some companies will give you a percentage of every year ACV of an initial deal, right? As I think about my mantra of behaviors and incentives aligning, I actually don't necessarily agree with that principle. What I'm ultimately asking a partner to do is to bring me into a potential new customer account, but in all likelihood, they're not having any direct conversation or negotiation with the end customer on how we contract the deal. How many years are they signing up for? And so for me, aligning incentives and behavior, I'll give them a percent of first year or the average contract value. But to give percentage of every year of a deal, there's a behavior that aligns to that, right? And so I think that's another principle of ours is I don't want to be the partner program ever that has to bring incentives down. Over time, I would rather have new programs roll out and greater incentives come through. And ultimately, we need to also build a profitable company, right? So being conscious about that and building the partner, we call it universe, not ecosystem. We're trying to think big here and not personally prefer that term, but just building it in a very conscious manner so that we can consistently improve incentives and never take that big step back and upset partners or have a drastic change to their fundamental business model with us, that's really important as well.
I love that you talked about radical transparency and how setting expectations upfront on defining a good partnership and what this can look like and what the incentives are helps everyone make informed decisions. You also talked about the difference earlier in evaluating a partner for whose client base is predominantly SMB versus Fortune 500, right? And I know that in any software company, enterprise sales is a key to success too. And so there's an enterprise aspect to partnerships, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you see a healthy partner ecosystem driving success at an enterprise sales level, because earlier we also talked about just the complexity of customers, and every customer is on a different journey. So when you get to the enterprise level, complexity goes up, it doesn't go down.
It absolutely ratchets up. And I think the best example of a partnership to articulate the enterprise motion would be the GSI, or Global Systems Integrator. So this is all those big names everyone knows of, right? The household names like Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, IBM, many others, KPMG, Bain, so on and so forth. And fundamentally, if you look at, let's just say, a Fortune 500 company, typically when they're looking at buying a new software, unless it's really a, kind of a smaller point solution, but typically they're looking at it in the context of a much larger business problem they are trying to solve. So either, revenue has flatlined, and so they need to look for new revenue streams. And so as part of looking for new revenue streams, they need a software that allows them to monetize on new business models. That's probably the world I came from at Zuora. Or, they're having trouble executing quarter on quarter with consistency, or making in quarter adjustments. So now they need to look at a really fast, easy to adapt, agile business planning software that allows them to make decisions on the fly with confidence. Pigment example. So ultimately they're starting with a top line business problem, and invariably you will see them bring in typically a large GSI to help them define and execute across that entire journey to achieve the top line business outcome they want. And so as it pertains to a software purchase in that, oftentimes it's not purchase of a single software. There may be multiple softwares at play to actually achieve the end outcome that they want, right? And what a GSI brings to the table is they have industry expertise. They've done this for many, many customers in that industry, and they know exactly what good looks like for the industry and how these solutions integrate with one another, connectors and APIs aside, right? But there's a business process overlay to that. And so they bring that to the table. But with that, they also bring accelerators and kind of a roadmap or blueprint for how to do this. And so I think when you think about enterprise sales from a software company perspective, understanding how the enterprise company buys software and what they're looking to accomplish is ultimately a change in the business or a top line business impacting outcome. GSI is invariably going to be involved. And the way you get yourself kind of upward into enterprise sales is you need to be on the GSI's radar. There are dime a dozen solutions in any given space out there. As we mentioned earlier, GSIs are highly matrixed organizations. It's not a question of they don't like you or they don't want to work with you, but if they're not aware of you, right, they're going to go with the products they have deep knowledge of and actively recommend those that they feel can achieve the customer's outcome. And so I think that's the framing I would encourage, whether it's partnership professionals or software companies as a whole, to have when they think about how an enterprise sale happens and the role that a GSI or a partner function can play in that. That's how the world comes together.
I hear the word complexity come out there, just in terms of the problems, the business cases are more complex. And so you have a need for sometimes multiple, like you said, multiple technologies, multiple softwares to come together to be able to solve one single complex issue. And so no, this has been super, super helpful. And kind of along that vein, I want to flip the script here for a second. Every software platform is going to have an idea of how they want to run partnerships, and every consulting firm is going to have an idea of how they think partnerships should run. And Pigment is building a partner universe because you're thinking bigger, right? So as you're building it, what are maybe some commonly held beliefs about partnerships that you passionately disagree with and you're trying to do differently?
Yep. So there's a few here. So one, that they slow down the sales cycle, right? Put yourself in a rep's shoes. I understand the calculus. If I have to bring a partner into my deal, it now means there's another party to coordinate with. I have another party to do sync calls with. They're going to slow down conversations with the customer. They're not interested in selling the software, right? So there's that perception that they're going to slow down a sales cycle. What you will actually find in productive or like impact driving partner ecosystems, they will typically result in significantly higher average deal size. It will result oftentimes in a faster time to close of a deal and in higher win rates. And those are all variables that can ultimately help a rep get to their sales quota. And so I think there's a reframing reps need to think about. The same way you would say an enterprise deal takes longer, yes, but it's 3 times the size of a mid-market deal. You probably need at least one of those to make your number at the end of the year. I think it's a similar framing when thinking about partner involvement in sales cycles, is that ultimately they're also impacting other metrics that can help you get to your number at the end of the day. So I think that's one. Second is there's definitely a prevailing perception, especially with perhaps more inexperienced partner functions, that the GSIs are in it to just drive massive services deals for themselves. And, I can understand that perspective, right? Oftentimes there's very large transformational efforts they're driving. At the end of the day, though, or they are serving the customer. And the customer expectation, especially in the last probably 5 to 10 years, there's absolutely an expectation of fast time to value. And so ultimately, I think what you're going to see the GSIs recommend is combination of fast time to value with confidence on delivering that fast time to value, right? That is overwhelmingly what you will see bear fruit in market. Ultimately, that will build trust with their end customer and result in them earning more business, right? So there's perhaps a reframing there because of the ERP kind of boom is, I don't want to say it's over, but that has fundamentally changed with cloud software. So I think there's definitely a change there for folks to wrap their heads around. One more I'll just share is oftentimes I've seen this friction point between internal services organizations and then the partner organizations is they can't implement as well as our people can. And again, on the surface, if you look at, okay, that's probably true. You're closer to the product. You know the roadmap better as an internal services person. But when you take a step back, I would argue there's an equal sense of responsibility on the software organization around how they enable their partners and set them up to be successful. And this comes back to the point of being easy and friendly to partner with. That is so much of a critical element to partners actually being successful in implementing your software. And so the process and enablement journey you define to ramp your partners up ultimately is almost a dependency in then them getting to parity or even a greater level of quality than perhaps you could implement internally just because of all the other services they can provide, right? Not just the pure expertise.
And what you just said, it makes me think about a marriage. And some of the advice that my wife and I got as we were getting married is this is not 50-50. It's 100 and 100. And so you talk about how it's the software provider's responsibility to ensure that platform is set up for success. We say, well, they can't implement as well as we can. Well, that might be true, but it's 100% your responsibility to make sure that over time they can. And that kind of dovetails into this idea. You talk about shifting a framework. And to me, that sounded like shifting into delayed gratification and long-term vision. So delayed gratification is it might take you more time to develop the relationship with the partners, but you're going to have larger deals and more opportunities down the road. And then two, even if that partner's in there trying to do a broader finance transformation, you're continuing to build out your product and making sure your product's a part of that roadmap. You have opportunities to expand the business there as well. Is that fair?
Marriage is a great way to describe partnerships. It's definitely a much more of a long-term journey than perhaps direct sales, as an example. And yes, both companies are committing up front to invest in one another, just like in a marriage, to go on this journey together, to, work through the good and the bad, right? And good times and bad. So I love that analogy. I'm actually probably going to steal that from you. But that's absolutely right. And so I think with that, also a successful marriage or partnership is built on open and transparent communication, right? Because granted, you have two different organizations or entities coming together, you're going to hit bumps in the road. It's a question of how do you communicate those? How do you work through them? How do you find a positive resolution that gets you back on track to where you ultimately both want to go with the partnership? something that's absolutely spot on. And also, I think for executive teams who are listening here, you must also prepare that there is going to be an upfront investment in a partner function, right? It's not like you're going to go invest in partnerships today and 20 days from now, you're going to have an inflow of leads. You might see some, but to really build the foundations right, you could expect anywhere from 6 to 9 months with a regional SI program to see real business impact. And with GSIs, you're looking at probably closer to 12 to 18 months, right? These just being larger organizations that take more time to evangelize to onboard, to sign up with, so on and so forth.
So, hey, we're kind of wrapping up here, and at the EPM show is about giving folks an unfair career advantage. So talk to me a little bit about, if I'm someone in the audience and I want to advance my career in technology partnerships, either as a consultant or an implementer or at a platform company like Pigment, what advice would you have?
So advice I would have, if you're not, let's assume you're not currently in a partnerships role. Advice I would have is obviously get closer to the function. So what's great about partnerships is you touch in many ways every part of the business. You work with marketing, you work with services, you work with sales, so on and so forth. At my prior company, actually, probably one of my top performers came from the marketing function into partnerships, also had a BDR background, but ultimately he brought a unique skill set that really helped our function and helped him be successful ultimately in managing GSI partnerships. I've seen similar moves. I moved myself from the services organization into partnerships. So my first advice would be, if that's where you want to go, look at the routes you can get there by leveraging on transferable skills you already have. Second, there are various communities out there. I'm not a spokesperson for any of them, so I won't give specific names, but there are various communities out there for partnerships professionals. And that's also a great place to invest in yourself and tap into just the wealth of knowledge across many, many people. Third, personal story. Right before I joined Pigment, this was my first global partner function role. So I knew there were areas of partnerships I had more experience than others, and I wanted to diversify my knowledge as much as I could before joining. So there was a podcast I searched up on SaaS partnership. There are about 200 episodes of this thing, and they speak to all different kinds of professionals from the industry, right? Another great place to get resources and learning. So I would say ultimately it's what you get out of it is what you put in, and you've got to think strategically around how you're going to articulate to a partnership professional that you can successfully transition into a partner role, right? But I think the good part there is you touch every part of the organization. So to some extent, there's transferability from any part of the organization into partnerships.
One of the things that Blake and I have been harping on lately with our clients and just folks we come in contact with on careers is that it all starts with a radical ownership mentality, and no one cares about your career as much as you do. So if you want to be in partnerships, then you have to find your way to get closer and closer to that function and learn how to communicate the transferable skills that you have that can make you successful. That's fantastic. Ron, I'll get you out of here on this. You have successfully led a company in partnerships through an IPO and beyond, and now you're growing Pigments Partnership Universe. What is your next big, hairy, audacious goal?
So the professional one, just going along the theme of Pigment Partner Universe, it is literally to build the best partner program out there. I know that is a tall order. There's some amazing, very old companies that have phenomenal partner programs, but they also weren't built overnight, right? These things take years and oftentimes more to build. That is the audacious goal. And my personal perspective is your goal's not big enough if you're not getting laughed out of the room. So that's the professional one. The personal one, I would say I've been into cars since I was a kid. I recently started go-karting with my son. He's 6. In some ways, I feel like he's late to the game as I see other kids out there. But for him to be the next Lewis Hamilton, 15 years from now driving in Formula One, that's the personal audacious goal, if that's what he wants to do.
Go-karting. That is awesome. And I have to imagine that's just some awesome quality time with him too.
It's quality time with him. Selfishly, it meets some of my hobby interests too. So it's
right.
We got there.
See, I'm like you, except I want my kids to get into golf because I want to play more golf. That's at least funny. That's awesome. Well, hey, where can people find you if they want to reach out and talk more about partnerships?
Yeah, you can just find me on LinkedIn, Rohan Batra. I think it's linkedin.com/Rohan Batra 1611. So that's the best place to find me, and we can connect from there.
Awesome. Rohan, thanks for the time today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Great to share ideas with you, Chad, and best of luck with the podcast.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Wherever you're consuming this, if it's YouTube, if it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribed. We have a lot more amazing guests on the way, a lot more great content. We're doing our best to bring you value and have fun while we do it. We really want this to be a career advantage, listening to this show, and we want you to enjoy it. So it means a lot. Make sure you're subscribed for what's to come. And also, if you're up for it, it would mean a lot if you leave us a like, a comment, a rating, a review, whatever platform you're on. That really helps, and it gets us fired up when we see those. So I appreciate you guys. Find us on LinkedIn. I'm Blake Bozarth, my co-host Chad Pyke with a Y. Would love to connect with you there. Have an awesome day. See you next time. Peace.